And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Not one single Republican voted for the American Rescue Plan. And honestly, truthfully, anybody surprised by that? Really, anybody surprised by the fact that not one member of the Republican Party in either the House or the Senate voted to help their constituents? It's mind-blowing to me. It really just quite remarkable in the fact that not one. But the House voted today. They have passed the $1.9 trillion rescue plan. The White House says they will sign the bill in a ceremony on Friday. I'm not expecting a big to-do like with cannons, but we should. This is that kind of transformational change. This is, to steal a line from Joe Biden, a big you-know-what deal. This is a big deal. But again, not one Republican voted for it. It's crazy. And what's even more so interesting is, the stunts that the Republicans tried to delay it. And even for the shortest amount of time, the Congresswoman with nothing better to do, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has no committee assignments, and again, dumb on the Democrats for doing the work the Republicans should have done. She again, asked for an early adjournment because then they could push it back 45 minutes. This is the kind of petty nonsense that you get out of these people. And I guess, should we be surprised? No. This is going to be, you're going to hear about this a lot. This is a big deal. The fact that not one Republican voted for it, not one. And yet, some really good things in here. Everyone's going to get $1,400 to help them make them through the next couple of months, kids included, or I should say everyone who $75,000 and below for an individual, you get the $1,400, $150,000 for a couple, you get the full amount. It cuts off, it prorates up to $80,000 for an individual, $160,000 for a couple, and then nothing beyond that. The last time it went up to $200,000 for a couple and $100,000 for an individual. You're going to get some unemployment extensions, $300 a week on top of your state unemployment. That's going to go through, I guess till Labor Day is what they're saying. Also, the first $10,200 in unemployment benefits will not be taxed. Of course, with people with incomes under $150,000. But this is one of those things where you go, I would have loved to have seen them make that permanent. It's one of those little pet peeve things that I've been talking about ever since I started this show. So for the last 16 years, this has been one of those little slap in the face things that whenever Democrats get the controls, you go, this has got to go. I was screaming about this back in 2008 and 9 and 10 and during that period. Of course, they didn't do it. Also, the child tax credit, $3,000 for each kid, 6 to 17. I think they did cap it at 4. And then if you have children under 6, that will be $3,600 per kid. Also, there's some paycheck protection program money in there, about $7.25 billion to help small businesses keep people on their payroll as we get through this. Good thing. Some education money, and this is the big stuff. Some education money coming into the state, going to go 90% allocated to local agency or your local school districts to make sure that they can keep the teachers on the payroll, make sure that they can keep the schools clean, make sure that they can upgrade where they need to. So this is a big one. Also $39 billion in grants for higher education, because guess what? A lot of universities probably not going to make it through this. And that is a bad thing for a country that needs an educated workforce. So that's a good thing. Also $15 billion are directed to help with childcare. Like I said, the childcare and development block grant. That's going to help people have somewhere to have their kids while they go to work. Also, I like the fact that they've thrown in some LIHEAP money, about $4.5 billion, going to help people stay warm in the winter here, and a little cool in the summer. Also, some money for the supplemental nutrition program for the WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children, up to $35 extra a month for the next couple of months. In that, I think that is a good thing. Also, our seniors are going to get a little boost. They've thrown in $1.4 billion to the Older American Act. That's to help feed seniors, to make sure that they get something. And one of the programs that George W. Bush tried to cut every year of his presidency. This tiny little program, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. It's going to throw $37 million into that to make sure that low-income seniors get nutritional food. This isn't, here's a coupon for mac and cheese. This is actually like vegetables and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that, it seemed kind of cruel during the Bush years that every budget would come out, they would try and take this away. And it's such a small amount that it's like, why would you even, it's not even worth wasting the time to say, I want to take it out before someone says, no, that's got to go back in. And you go, oh, okay, I will put it back in. It's crazy. Also, the CDC, they got $7.5 billion to track, to administer, and to distribute the vaccine, to get it into our arms. $46 billion for diagnosing it and tracing it, which I think is important, and $2 billion to buy the stuff we need to keep people safe during this moment and to get things moving. There's also some money for rental assistance, $25 billion to keep people in their rental. And this is really, this is a payout. This is a bailout to the landlords. This is keeping people in their homes, absolutely, and that's great. But it really is a bailout for the landlords because they're hurting too. The banks come and knocking. Also, $5 billion for emergency housing vouchers for our homeless or survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. Also, some money for transit. I think $30 billion for public transit. $1.5 billion for Amtrak employees to stay on the payroll and bring some of those folks back. I think that's good. We got to keep people working. The airports are going to get about $8 billion to stay afloat. The airline workers about $15 billion to stay afloat. Also, some money for the manufacturing workers in the aerospace industry. And the thing is, and the reason I'm going through all this is because, our economy is so vast. And you go, oh, $1.9 trillion, that's a lot of money. Not really. When you're talking about an economy as big as ours and a need as big as we have. This is rescuing us. This is a lifeline to keep our economy from collapsing. If we do nothing, we got major problems ahead. I think if we spend this little bit of money and you go, oh, it's enormous. It is when you look at the number, but in the grand scheme of things, not so much. And it's something that will come back. Now, I do find it interesting that there is some corporate America money in there. And my favorite story was of the Small Business Administration. That's going to get something like some over $25 billion, somewhere well over that, for grant programs for restaurant and other food and drinking establishments. So the bars are going to get money. And the reason I find this one most interesting is Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi. Senator Wicker today sent out a tweet that said, quote, independent restaurant operators have won $28.6 billion worth of targeted relief. This funding will ensure small business can survive the pandemic by helping to adapt their operations and keep their employees on the payroll. The $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, which features grants to restaurants in need, overcame a key challenge this weekend. And he links to an article from one of these restaurant groups saying, hey, there's all this money. This might help us. Why I find that interesting is Roger Wicker voted against it. Yeah, the senator from Mississippi, as every Republican senator and every Republican congressman, they voted against it. So why the audacity to then say, oh, look at this. Look how wonderful this is. There's this program out there. You should use it. And it overcame a key challenge this weekend. Yeah, the key challenge, you and the rest of your ilk. And we're going to see a lot of this in the coming weeks and months. I guarantee you, every one of these Republicans who voted against it are going to go out into their communities and to their constituents and say, look at what you got. Aren't you glad? Look what I did for you. You didn't do anything. And we see this all the time. But this is what they're going to do because it's who they are. Now, the thing that gets me is I can't believe that not one Republican voted for this bill. Not one. And it is overwhelmingly popular. A new Pew Research Center poll just came out. Looking at the Republicans, they found that the low-income Republicans, 63% supported the American Rescue Plan. The upper crust, surprisingly, I'll be honest, the upper income people, a quarter of them supported it. To me, that's enormous. And that gap between the upper and the lower, pretty sizable. And something you would think that the Republican elected official would kind of look at. Because, they do need those low-income Republicans to go and flip the lever for them. No, they're gonna convince them that they were for it all along. Trust me, that's going to happen. But it's interesting to me that they just don't even care what their constituents say. When 63% of low-income Republicans are in favor of this, and you don't get not one Republican vote, it's pretty incredible to me. And look, it's a huge gap. A huge gap. Now you got 96% of middle-income Democrats support it, while only 37% of middle-income Republicans. I see this, the 63% of middle-income Republicans who don't support it. I think they could, if they really wanted to, because since they're against it, they should donate the $1,400 in the money and all the benefits that they get to people who actually need it. This is kind of turning it around on things that they always throw. Well, if you want to pay higher taxes, you can. Well, you don't. If you don't need this, by all means, there are people who do. Tons of them. And the reality is here's the thing. And all we hear is how the Republicans are whining that, well, they didn't reach out to us. They didn't talk to us. Not kind of surprising. 57% of us. 57% of Americans believe Joe Biden did do enough to reach out to Republicans and did so in good faith. And I think he did. I really think Biden gave it the shot. I think the Democrats, put out the olive branch. And as I've been saying for the longest time, they extended the olive branch. They just weren't going to let the Republicans snatch it out of their hands and beat the snot out of them with it. They learned that lesson in 2009, and good on them, finally, to learn a lesson. And this is where I think Joe Biden, having sat in the White House for 8 years as Obama's number 2, he saw this play out. And which is why I'll tell you, I'm thrilled with what he's done thus far. I'm thrilled with what he has done because he has risen to the challenge. He's risen to the moment, as I've been saying. And I'll tell you, I was a little concerned. Being Obama's number 2, a little concerned that we'd see an Obama 2.0. Not yet. And look, he did observe Mitch McConnell's dirty tricks all those years, and all those years when he was in the Senate. So I think he's a lot more wily than most people give him credit for. But I'm happy to see this because we need it. We need the boost. And as I said, this is an overwhelmingly popular bill. People want it. And it's going to be done well before the 14th, which I believe is the day that the last one ends. So we're going to be in good shape. And I had someone send me an email yelling at me going, well, this only helps the urbans. And I'm going, no, this helps rural Pennsylvania and rural areas as well, because they still get the $1,400. That's going to happen. There's an additional $10.4 billion in overall federal funding going into agriculture and food supply. Farms, rural area stuff. There's a lot of money going into that. And that's going to help. The child tax credit is going to help people in rural communities. There's also a rural transit investment that's going to happen. That is a good thing as well. So this idea that, no, it's only for the urbans, that's a Republican talking point, and something that's got to stop. Seriously, it's got to stop. Now, the good thing is, first, the Dow today hit 32,000, first time ever. And while, Donald Trump would be taking credit for it and doing victory laps and victory tweeting that he did it and he did it alone, it's all me, I did it. Joe Biden just went about his job. Joe Biden tweeted out today, hey, the checks are coming. Help is on the way. He buried his head and started doing his job. Now, look, Morgan Stanley has raised their 2021 forecast for our economic growth up to 7.3%. That is a booming economy. That's enormous. And I understand that, I guess Friday, President Biden is going to start the tour. The American Rescue Plan tour, going to get out into communities and sell this. Look, people got to know what they're getting and who it's coming from. And as I said the other day, when the Butch Lewis Act was included in this, I think all my Teamster buddies who were big Trump supporters, who were complaining that their pensions were going belly up because Wall Street was screwing them over and everything, to have to know that it was Joe Biden, not their president, and the evil Democrats who saved them from poverty. This is something you got to remind people of. Oh, something else good today happened. Not just saving our economy and helping the poor and total, complete dynamic change in how we address that, but Merrick Garland was confirmed Attorney General. So all of the insurrectionists and all the people who are responsible, it's coming. It is coming. So there you go. Gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna talk with Jimmy Williams from the Painters Union about their big announcement today. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1925. That was the day the first civil lawsuit for damages was filed on behalf of the Radium Girls. During the 1910s and 20s, radium was all the rage. It was considered a medical cure-all for everything from blindness to asthma. The U.S. Radium Corporation employed hundreds of young women in New Jersey and Illinois to paint radium onto watch dials and military instruments. Women workers were instructed to shape the paintbrushes to a fine point with their lips in order to paint the numbers onto the watch faces. They soon fell ill. Many complained of losing scores of teeth and shattered and rotting jaws. The death toll began to rise. U.S. Radium and other related companies initially tried to smear the women as suffering from syphilis. Catherine Wiley of the New Jersey Consumers League began investigating the use of radium by dial painters. She was also concerned about how emissions affected the community surrounding the plant. Wiley enlisted the help of Alice Hamilton, mother of industrial medicine and occupational toxicology. The chief medical examiner of Essex County determined the women suffered from radium exposure. They were exhaling radon gas. The findings were earth-shattering for the industry. Case proceedings were highly publicized in the press. Extremely frail and sick young women appeared in court, barely able to walk or testify. The company agreed to settle the case. $10,000 for each woman, a $400 a year pension, and medical care. Women at the Ottawa plant suffered for years before finally learning the truth about their job-related illnesses. The case impacted fields related to occupational safety and health. It also fundamentally broadened scientific understanding of radioactive elements. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So now that we've got the American Rescue Plan almost signed, I'm pretty confident that the signature will be on the document Friday. But I'm taking the win right now. I think it's a good opportunity to take the win, be happy for a little bit. But now that this is passed, it's time to really focus on the other stuff. This is to save us from collapse. I'm talking about the stuff that's going to move us forward. And that is H.R. 1 to get people the right and opportunity to vote, and also the PRO Act, which will give people the right to, well, earn a reasonable living and share in the fruits of their labor. Because we've got an opportunity right now. We've got an opportunity to undo 50 years worth of horrible policies and massive redistribution of wealth now, if we can only get out of our own way. And part of that has to do with getting rid of this arcane tool that Mitch McConnell has used masterfully to derail all progress. And I'm hoping that it's time to return to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and break the filibuster. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Jimmy Williams to come talk with us. Jimmy is the General Vice President at Large of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Today, their big announcement, the first building trades union in the country to say it's time to end the filibuster. Jimmy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me tonight, Rick. I appreciate it.
So this is a pretty big announcement. The unions usually stay out of this kind of stuff. Why'd you jump into it?
So I think it's an easy one, right? We've had, you said it, 50 years. It's longer than that. It's going on 70 years. And, what we know to be true is that 8 times in our recent history, the filibuster has stopped labor law reform, right? It has. We can go back to 2008 with the Employee Free Choice Act, when the majorities were even bigger in the Senate, and one U.S. senator could hold up passing the Employee Free Choice Act.
And that was Arlen Specter.
I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, my friend. And I can tell you, if the labor movement didn't learn from that mistake, then I don't know what we can learn from. Arlen Specter said he would not support the bill, and then within 3 months was being primaried and switched his allegiance to the Democratic Party, and the labor movement endorsed him. So it's an easy one to come out against the filibuster. It's simple, right? There's a movement that is happening in this country, and it's real. People were sick of being divided.
Yep.
And they're seeing their government put workers first for the first time and mean it. And we know what the other side is going to do. We know it. They've already done it every single time, and they're on the losing side this time. The tide is turning.
No, and what is it? When is it that you go and finally realize that? When I forget, I think it's Maya Angelou who said the quote of, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. When are we going to finally believe that our Republican friends don't care about us? They don't care about the country. They don't care about workers. They only care about themselves and the very wealthy. When do we finally go, oh, I got it?
When do we force them to have their real conversation? When do we force them to actually stop with their fake rhetoric and actually talk about how they help workers, as opposed to doing the things that they've done for generations, which is just continue to divide us?
Yep.
And the filibuster is the tool that's been used. It's the wedge that's been used.
And this
Democrats
is
very light.
Sorry, this is why I say that we need to go back to the good old days and bring back the talking filibuster. I want to hear Mitch McConnell and all of the Republicans explain to me why unions are bad. I want to hear all of them tell me why we should be putting up these massive roadblocks for people to get to exercise the franchise. I want to hear them say it out loud. I want to see them say it out loud. And I think their constituents need to see it as well.
Make them go on record, right? Make them go on record. Because when they do, their old arguments don't work anymore. And they'll say all the things, all the buzzwords, union bosses, union handouts. The truth of it is, 90% of the private sector workforce doesn't even belong to a union, yet 68% of them, when asked, would say they would form a union tomorrow, right? Make them eat their words.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things that, again, I go back to. It's such a simple thing. Look, if it's so important to you that it has to stop. Everything should stop. And you get your stack of Bibles, you get your stack of books, you get whatever you need, and you go in there and you hold the floor. If it is that important, it should stop. Because what happens, and you know this as well as anybody or better than anyone, all they do is they go, oh, we're going to filibuster this. And they go, oh, next. And they go on to something else. I go back to the Clinton era. One of the only reasons I voted for Bill Clinton is he said he was going to pass a strike replacement bill. It came up, one guy, Bob Dole, filibustered that bill, and I didn't hear about it again until the employee free choice came up over a decade later.
We also see it too, Rick, like you mentioned HR 1, right? And that's not being talked about enough, I think, in the labor movement, but obviously we're supportive of, and everybody is, but it is more of an attack on democracy than anything else. When you have, things that are 70 to 75% popular amongst the American public, right? And, you're going to stand in the way, and one person's going to stand in the way for real change. It's about democracy. Democracy was under attack on January 6th, right on display. We all watched it. And I think that was a change. That was a moment that this country changed and said, enough with the divisiveness. We have to move forward. And thankfully, we have an administration that says, yeah, we do. And we're going to put workers first. We're going to put working people first, not union bosses. That argument is so old.
I've never had a union boss. I've been a part of a union all of my working life. Never had a boss. I have had employers that have tried to fire me. I generally have representatives from the union who try and help me. So it's a whole new frame to me, and one I've always despised. But here's the thing, and I think you're absolutely right. The idea that right now the Republicans are doing everything they can do to stop us from exercising our right to vote should kind of explain where their thinking is. They're afraid of we the people. All of the people, and they should be. The fact that not one Republican voted for this rescue plan, I think speaks volumes, especially when you look at the fact that 63% of low-income Republicans want it. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I can say this as a proud building trades worker, there was a time in this country where there were building trades supportive Republicans that would vote on things like Davis-Bacon, but yet maybe not vote party line on labor law reform, right? And infrastructure. Would talk about infrastructure, get reelected on it. They're few and far between. There were only 5 members of the House of Representatives from the Republican Party who voted for the PRO Act. And they came from very strong union markets, union cities, union towns. That party needs to take a look inward. They do.
No, you're absolutely right. You had Brian Fitzpatrick from Philadelphia. Right. You had Chris Smith and Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey. You had John Katko from New York and Don Young from Alaska. Those are your 5. Right. And I remember a time where you probably had 90 Republicans who were labor friendly and would fight back against things like prevailing wage attacks and this stuff. In fact, later in the show, my friend Bob Ney was one of those Republicans back in the early 2000s. And they've all been eradicated from the Republican Party. And
yes,
this is what I keep saying. Please, Republicans, take your party back somewhere to sanity.
Yep.
So let's talk about the PRO Act, since this is labor's, I guess, has to be their number one priority. Why this? Why do you think this is the answer?
I mean, it's long overdue, number one. But, number two, it fixes all it does is bring the balance back to what the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act was, right? And then undo 70 years of just backwards repeal of what the true intent of it was to give the power to the workers, to allow workers to organize. Collective bargaining, it just strengthens what we know is the best tool for workers to make it to the middle class and work, for things that, when we unleashed the power of workers after the passage of the act, we created things like pensions. We created things like healthcare plans. We've seen wages rise. We've seen it work. All it does is take us back to those days. It also fixes all of those loopholes that employers have been able to use. And doing away with things like worker misclassification, which in our industry, at least in the construction industry, is, the tool that has weaponized workers from being able to collectively bargain, right? They don't even have access to collective bargaining when they're classified as independent subcontractors.
Right.
And the repeal of right to work, it has the things in there needed for workers to make the choice. There's nothing in there that says, tomorrow the whole workforce is going to unionize. No, it's going to allow them to have the choice. That argument that workers' freedoms are taken away under unions is bull. It's bull.
No.
If workers don't want to organize, they won't. We all know that. Every organizer that's ever worked an organizing campaign knows when the workers want it, they're going to get it. When they don't, they don't.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink, obviously. But you brought up an interesting thing, because the building trades model is something that I see as a big part of what the future is going to look like, because we're moving to this gig kind of economy where people are, they're almost independent contractors, but they're reliant on these employers, and there's a whole movement right now. I'm sure you see it. Of organizing against the PRO Act, saying, no, they're going to take your freedoms away and make you be an employee. And heaven forbid we have people who are employees. I look at your model as the right one, in that your members don't work for one contractor or another all the time. You move around, but you have a maintenance of wages, a maintenance of benefits, a maintenance of educational opportunities. I see what you guys do as the future for the gig economy if we make the right choices now.
Yeah, and look, the money interests that are out there in the gig economy are huge. The time to educate folks is now, with this debate and this argument being nationwide. And we've seen where freelancers feel like, the passage of AB 5 in California may have hindered them because their employers sent some of their jobs to other states. Well, the PRO Act is federal law. The PRO Act will give even freelancers the opportunity to organize what they want their industry to look like, right? That's the thing that people have to understand about how industries can organize under the PRO Act. It puts the hands back into the workers. It doesn't take it away.
Now, I've had someone complain to me that they're reinstating the ABC test, which talks about if you truly are an independent contractor, if you truly are self-employed, because clearly, if you are your own boss and you are your own business, it's already a carve out. But the complaint is that by having this strict test, that you're going to force these people to be employees, and I'm looking at this a little differently, and maybe you can help me here, because I'm looking at this ABC test as it's not a matter of whether you can be an independent contractor or not. It's a matter of if you can join a union or not, is what this is about. Or am I misreading how this is being played?
I think it's also about, look, there are places where legitimate independent subcontractors, if that is what they want to do, it's fine. I could take you to job sites in 3/4 of this country where I can walk right on a job site, ask somebody who they work for. They'll say, I work for Joe's Drywall, right? And Joe's Drywall may have 500 people working for him that are all independent contractors. None of them are employees of Joe's Drywall. All of the liability gets shifted over to the individual. They have no workman's compensation insurance. They have no rights under the National Labor Relations Act to collectively bargain. It's the number one reason for wage theft. It defunds our local, economies because people aren't paying taxes. Payroll taxes don't get paid. It's the biggest scam going in at least our industry, in the construction industry, and workers have been held back for a long time. This model has been used for a long time in the construction industry.
No, I remember I was 18. I was working building houses, and the guy would come pay us in cash, and one day some idiot shot a nail into my foot, and they're like, yeah, just go home. And I'm going, no, I'm going to the doctor. He goes, well, we don't. You can pay for it. And that was my first experience in being misclassified as a non-employee, and I never went back to work there again. But and that was 30 plus years ago. So you're right, this hasn't gone away. Last question on this: do you think we're gonna get this through? Do you think the Democrats are gonna have the spine to move it?
We're gonna find out. What we know for sure is it's two things, right? Number one, any politician, Democrat or Republican, will never have the support of the painters union again. if they don't go on record in support and move this issue. And we're damn close to saying, if you're not in support of also removing the current form of the filibuster, we're not going to support you either, because the time's now, right? So we're going to find out. I know one thing for sure. This president of the United States has done more in 50 days than we've seen a Democratic president do for working people, that we've had lip service forever. I know for a fact the leadership in the Senate wants to move forward. We're going to find out. We're going to find out.
No, Joe Biden's been the most pro-labor president of my lifetime. In fact, on day one, I argue he was the most pro-union president in my lifetime by firing Peter Robb and sending him to the curb in the most unceremonious of fashions. I want to get your thoughts. Got about a minute here.
Sure.
You guys came out recently and are supporting and have partnered with the Blue-Green Alliance. Obviously, the Blue-Green Alliance is a group that brings labor and environmental groups together to fight on the climate issues and our environment. Why'd you guys jump into that?
It just makes sense. I mean, the time's right? We're talking about a potential $1 or $2 billion infrastructure package. The coalition that got Joe Biden elected was not just labor unions. It's the climate justice community. Our members can stand to benefit. And if you couple all of that with the passage of the PRO Act, we can reorganize, and we can also clean up our climate for future generations. We like to say, not only do we want our kids to live in a clean environment, we want our kids to also have unions.
No, absolutely. And as a guy we had on the other day from the Blue-Green Alliance said, because we were talking about it, and he said, because we were talking about the big windmill project off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, and he said that the painter guy told him there's a lot of paint on those windmills, and I'm going, I get it.
And a project labor agreement.
There you go. Good stuff. And when you come back, we can talk about that and why that's important as we move forward, because hopefully a big infrastructure bill on the horizon. But good day today. Jimmy, I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Jimmy Williams, General Vice President at Large of the International Painters Union and Allied Trade Union. Check out their website, IUPAT.org, the website. We'll get links out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that farm labor activist Cesar Chavez broke a 25-day fast. He fasted as a sign of commitment to nonviolence during the struggle for farm workers in Delano, California, to gain fair wages and safe working conditions. During the fast, he only drank water. He broke the fast with a ceremonial mass in Delano. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy was in attendance. At the mass, Chavez was too weak to give a speech, so he gave his written words to Reverend James Drake to share with those in attendance. He wrote, "We are gathered here today not so much to observe the end of the fast, but because we are a family bound together in common struggle for justice. We are a union family celebrating our unity and the nonviolent nature of our movement. The fast has had different meanings for different people. Some of you may still wonder about its meaning and importance. It was not intended as a pressure against any growers. For that reason, we have suspended negotiations and arbitration proceedings and relaxed the militant picketing and boycotting of the strike during this period. I undertook the fast because my heart was filled with grief and pain for the suffering of the farm workers. The fast was first for me and then for all of us in this union. It was a fast for nonviolence and a call for sacrifice." Chavez engaged in 2 more long fasts during his life as an activist. He fasted in 1972 for 24 days. And in 1988, at the age of 61, he fasted for 36 days to highlight the harmful effects of pesticides on farm workers and their children. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to highlight what Jimmy Williams was saying, the reality is Democrats have fallen down, and the filibuster has really what killed it, and which is why I think the filibuster has to go back to the good old days of the talking filibuster. But it was 1966. You had the National Right to Work Repeal Act that went down because of a filibuster. 77, you had the Labor Law Reform Act, went down to a filibuster. 94, the Labor Relations and Railway Act amendment went down to a Bob Dole filibuster. And in 07, the Employee Free Choice Act, thank you, Arlen Specter, went down because of a filibuster. And that was the end of them. They never came up again. All of those opportunities to stop the backslide of people being able to join and form unions, all of the opportunities to make real change stopped because of the filibuster. And we cannot let this moment go by and allow another decade, 2, 3 down the road until we talk about this again. Just can't happen. So that's my bit on that. Anyway, my next guest's here to share some thoughts on, again, I've been saying, look, Joe Biden, most pro-labor president of my lifetime, hands down. Joe's done some good things on the federal level. He is restoring federal workers' rights to unions and undoing the damage of the Trump administration. And here to share some thoughts on what that's going to look like. I've asked Richard Loeb to come talk with us. Richard's a senior policy counselor with the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE. Richard, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much, Rick, for having me on.
So I'm in this moment. I'm in a good mood. I don't know about you, but I'm very positive in this moment that there's an opportunity for some change.
I'm in a much better mood than when we last spoke. We last spoke just before the election, and the Trump administration had issued a bunch of executive orders back in 2018, and then they issued some more in late 2020 that were not good for the federal workforce, specifically federal unions. They really bashed federal unions, tried to essentially destroy them, and even for people who are not unionized, they tried to make them at-will employees, and they threatened to essentially turn hundreds of thousands of federal employees into political appointees.
Yeah.
Fortunately, all that went down.
Well, that is a great thing. Trying to bring back the good old days of the patronage stuff, and gladly it didn't happen. But you hit on something I think is really important. I don't think we talk enough about the at-will employment status of almost every worker in this country, unless you're covered by a collective bargaining agreement or some contract. Everyone's at will. You can be fired for any reason or no reason whatsoever, and I don't think we talk enough about that.
Federal employees are in a relatively good position with regard to that, although there are exceptions, and of course, political appointees generally serve at will, and there are indeed career civil servants who serve effectively in at-will status. Most federal employees do have certain due process rights, and they have those rights as a result of statutes. And in many cases, it's furthered by bargaining agreements, collective bargaining agreements that permit the union representing the employees to take matters to arbitration rather than going through the administrative and the judicial process that pertain to removal of federal employees. That's usually a much simpler process, much better for everyone involved. But federal employees do generally have some pretty good rights. The Trump administration tried to eviscerate those, both for people who were covered by collective bargaining agreements and especially for those not covered by collective bargaining agreements.
So now Joe Biden has said they're going to roll some of that. They're going to roll that stuff back. But that stuff doesn't just happen. It's not like you're flipping a switch. There's going to be I gotta imagine, and you're the one who's got to do this, a fairly lengthy process to undo the damage that's been done. No,
I have to give the Biden administration a lot of credit in this regard. Within 2 days after he was inaugurated, we had an executive order issued, 14003. That rescinded 4 separate Trump executive orders that either went after federal employees or went after their unions, in most cases went after both of them. And so he took care of that very rapidly. In fact, my understanding is he actually signed the documents on the 20th, but they weren't able to be issued for 2 days. But we were willing to wait the 48 hours after 4 years of misery. So he did do that, and he specifically, with respect to bargaining, he told the agencies to reopen all the collective bargaining agreements that had been negotiated, or called negotiated, that's a strange term, really.
I would argue imposed.
Yeah, they were effectively unilaterally imposed. I mean, in many cases, we didn't even sign them. He had them go back and reopen those contracts, and specifically said that any CBA that implemented any of the Trump EOs must cease and desist, and they had to go back, reopen them, and scrap all the vestiges of the Trump EOs from their collective bargaining agreements. Now, that could be a lengthy process, but there's definitely been movement, and there have been instructions issued to the agencies to get going. What makes it a little strange and could make it a little difficult, but I think will be successful, is there are only a few, well, I don't want to say, it's gone beyond a few members of the cabinet. Now we're up to, I think, almost a majority, almost the full cabinet has been confirmed and appointed. But we still don't have the entire cabinet in place, and we certainly have many agency heads that have not been appointed, and deputy heads and assistant heads. It's helpful to have those people in place to give the orders. Otherwise, we're facing off in many cases against the same labor management relations or labor relations people we faced off against during the Trump administration,
right.
And now they just have different marching orders. But the nature of the beast is that they're not necessarily inclined to work with the unions all that closely. Perhaps the most important thing that President Biden has done is he's also indicated to the agencies through the EOs that so-called permissive subjects, that are subjects that management does not have to negotiate with us as a matter of statute, should be part of the bargaining process. And that is a tremendous thing. We have not had anything like that since the Clinton administration. It lets us bargain over the numbers, types of positions, the grades, positions assigned to organizational divisions and work projects, and the technology, methods, and means of performing work. That goes beyond what even the statute requires the agencies to bargain over.
No, that's an incredible thing. That's the part of wages and hours are one thing, but conditions are the other. And that's one of the things that I talk about all the time. Having the ability to have some determination in what you do and how you do what you do, I think is just as important as the wages and hours.
Right, and remember, federal employees generally don't negotiate over wages. That's set by Congress and the administration, and the fringe benefits are largely determined by statute. So mostly what we end up bargaining over is the terms and conditions by which the work will be done, how work will be assigned. But this allows us to go beyond that and actually engage in bargaining over the nature of the organizational that will be performing the work.
No, it's a good thing, But here you said something a minute ago that caught my attention. That you've got the department heads still in place, and I started thinking about I always say I want boring bureaucrats running our government. I want people who are career people who know what they're doing, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House. They're still going to keep churning out the work that they're supposed to do, because I don't want these massive swings of leadership styles and ideology in place. I get that you're going to have department, the cabinet people who are going to change, but the marching soldiers should stay the same, I think. And I understand the last 4 years there's been a mass exodus. Do you see those people coming back, or are you still trying to fill vacancies that are open?
The administration indicates that it plans to rely a lot on career civil servants to do obviously most of the work, because that's the nature of government, is most of the work is done by career civil servants. But President Biden has shown his appreciation and his respect for civil servants in a number of his issuances, proclamations, and just actions he's taken to show his respect and the great responsibilities that he feels that the career civil service bears. one of the things that he did in the executive order I mentioned that rescinded the 4 Trump executive orders is he also invited unions back into the agencies, physically back in, restoring the offices, restoring official time for us to conduct labor negotiations and conduct labor relations business with the agencies. That means we not only get our office space back, but telephones and computers, and we get basically to do things that we normally would have done to represent employees in the workplace. One other thing I should probably mention that's in this executive order, which is really quite notable, is he asked the Office of Personnel Management, I think working with the other agencies, to study whether there should be a federal minimum wage, not by federal, I mean for federal employees, of $15 an hour. And I know that surprises a lot of people, but there are a number of federal employees, tens of thousands of federal employees, mostly who work in service-type occupations, maybe as aides in VA hospitals or in various types of trades, who do not make $15 an hour. I know people find that hard to believe. They figure all federal employees are making big money, and they can't, they find that somewhat difficult to believe. But there are tens of thousands of federal employees, particularly wage grade employees, who do not yet earn $15 an hour. And so, despite the fact that we couldn't get the new Fair Labor Standards minimum wage set at $15 an hour, I guess in the reconciliation bill, which I guess has now become law, he did ask the Office of Personnel Management to study having at least a $15 minimum wage for federal employees.
Now,
so
is that something he can do through executive order, or is that something that has to be passed by statute?
Well, that's a great question, and we believe he can do it through executive order. The president issues an executive order each year establishing the federal pay rates, and so we believe that he can do that. In some cases, it's done through administrative action below the level of the president, but we believe that it can be done through administrative action. So we're looking forward to that study and hope to have a fair amount of input on that.
Because at the end of the day, I'm a supporter of a $15 an hour minimum wage. Had the minimum wage from 1968 just kept up with inflation, it'd be $12.50 an hour right now. I think we should do something to move workers forward, because you're talking about any rollout of a $15 minimum wage is going to be 4 years down the road, because the bill that they were talking about, wouldn't have turned to $15 until 2025. So it would be $15 an hour by then anyway. So that seems to me about right. The problem is we've had such an assault on workers' rights and on the minimum wage for so long that we think that's a huge jump when it was just should have been the natural progression.
Oh, well, we completely agree, and I'm always stunned. I serve on something called the Federal Prevailing Wage Advisory Committee, and we review the wages and we make recommendations for certain locality rates for federal wage grade employees. And I'm always stunned by how many of the recommendations that we see from the staff that are for wages of less than $15 an hour. So fortunately, I think with the new leadership team in place, and I mentioned the Office of Personnel Management. I believe it's actually the Office of Management and Budget, which controls the federal budget,
right,
or at least the executive branch aspect of the federal budget. That's going to be doing the study. I assume they're going to be working with experts in wage and hour matters and economists. But we're very hopeful that we will get a $15 an hour minimum wage for federal employees, and hopefully that'll spread to the rest of the economy, because we'd like to think of the federal government as being a trendsetter in terms of good employment practices.
Do we have any idea yet who the administration is going to nominate for head of OMB?
Well, I'm sure you obviously know that the first nominee failed to muster the necessary votes in the Senate. Looks like the deputy director is going to sail through, and there are certainly some people who are speaking of her as the director. But I think the administration is still looking at it at various options. So no, we really don't know who they will ultimately nominate as the director of OMB.
But I got to imagine it's got to be better than the last guy.
That wouldn't be too difficult.
But here's the thing. I mean, this is the weird thing where you go, you could put a ham sandwich in there and it would still be better.
Well, the last director was the person who tried to turn hundreds of thousands of federal employees into career federal employees into political appointees. He gave up, I guess, at the end when it would have been pointless. It would have all been turned back around after President Biden was inaugurated. But he certainly caused a great deal of angst and for several months after the executive order was issued, just prior to the election. And I think they looked like they were going to go ahead and do it. Maybe such as one could have a positive fallout from the events of January 6th. One of them may have been that they realized that to push ahead with the politicization of the civil service might be just cause everybody to quit.
Just a bridge too far. Because,
I think when things got out of hand, they said, well, maybe this isn't such a great idea to pursue this right now.
But I don't think it's going to go away. Look, I mean, there's still a chance that, and it's my view, if we don't get some things done to make people's lives better in the next year, which I'm saying, we don't get that HR 1 push through or the PRO Act, I fear in 2025 we're putting another crazy Republican in the White House, and all these bad ideas come back. So for now it's breathe a sigh of relief, but worry about all these bad ideas keep boomeranging around, because the patronage thing, I've had conservatives tell me that to the winner goes the spoils, and that's how it should be, and that's scary thinking.
You're right, Rick. This is one of these areas where we constantly have to be vigilant. The fact is that these ideas percolate around in the right wing, blogosphere, and they constantly bring them back. They've been doing this now for 40, 50 years, and I don't doubt that we'll have the same ideas brought forth at some other point in the future. But I think we have to be prepared to battle them back and point out why they were such terrible ideas in the first place.
Yep.
And the struggle really never ends.
The struggle never ends, but we got to stay vigilant and got to vote and stay on that path. Richard, I appreciate the time. Good on you guys. Congrats, good stuff, and I hope we'll talk to you again soon.
Well, yes, and AFGE wants to thank the Biden administration so much for its efforts and for moving so quickly to get rid of those burdensome, onerous, and frankly just terrible EOs. It's really a new day for the federal workforce.
There you go. Good stuff.
Appreciate that greatly.
Appreciate the time, Richard. Richard Loeb, Senior Policy Counselor there at AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. New Yorkers woke up to find a foot of snow blanketing them. A million New Yorkers also discovered their usual routine was going to be disrupted. At 5 a.m., the Transport Workers Union had walked off the job, calling a strike against the Fifth Avenue Coach and New York City omnibus companies. The bus drivers' demands included a pay increase and an 8-hour workday. Many of the company's 3,500 employees were forced to work 60 hours or more a week. Michael Quill, the TWU president, led the strike. Quill was an Irish immigrant known for his energetic union leadership. The bus companies tried to turn public opinion against the strikers. They took out ads in the New York newspapers reading, "If you had to walk to work today, blame the Transit Workers Union." Other ads attempted to stir up anger by calling the union a communist-dominated, Moscow-directed outfit. Despite these tactics, thousands of other union workers across the city joined the bus drivers on the picket lines. Perhaps the most iconic moment of the strike came on St. Patrick's Day. The union had been denied a permit to join the city's annual parade. Undeterred, hundreds of union members donned TWU armbands and jaunty bus driver caps and marched anyway. The strike lasted for 12 days. Mayor LaGuardia sided with the company and urged the union to settle the strike. The union agreed to bring their negotiations to the New York State Mediation Board, where they won some ground on their demands, including a 9-hour workday. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
After looking into one of their main issues, I have to agree with Republicans. Our elections are being rigged. Anyone who takes an honest look can see that the electoral process is being stolen in broad daylight by Republican lawmakers. In state after state, GOP governors and legislators are on a rampage to rig the system so you can't vote. By you, I mean you African Americans, Latinx voters, Asian Americans, indigenous peoples, and practically all other non-white citizens. Also, you seniors, union members, poor people, students, immigrant families, and others with a tendency to vote for Democrats. Fraudulently shouting fraud, GOP officials insist that they must steal your democratic right to vote in order to protect the sanctity of the vote. They're actually confessing their own embarrassing weakness and political ineptitude by admitting we can't win. Their lineup of squirrely, increasingly kooky candidates and their anti-people, corporate-serving agenda have no ability to draw majority support, so their only hope to be elected is to jerry-rig America's democratic process with barriers, locks, bans, etc., to shut millions of citizens out of their polling places. Their 7 million vote defeat in last year's presidential race has spooked the Republican minority into a stampede of voter suppression initiatives this year. The Brennan Center for Justice, which tracks such maneuvers, reports that at least 253 bills have been introduced in 43 states to further obstruct Americans from casting ballots. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is pathetic, disgraceful political thuggery, not only stealing people's birthright, but stealing democracy from America itself. To help reject their shameful corruption of elections, go to commoncause.org. commoncause.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember the other day that I talked about Trader Joe's. Evidently, Trader Joe's had an employee who had the bright idea that he was going to use the suggestion box and suggest that Trader Joe's do some things to keep the workforce safe, like CO2 monitoring, like better PPE, like mask mandates for customers with a 3 strikes and you're out kind of policy. Some really well thought out, well reasoned arguments on why Trader Joe's should protect their workforce and how to go about it. And this guy and a coworker signed on to it, said, "Yep, this is what we want." So the guy puts the letter in the suggestion box and is then fired for having the audacity, I guess, to let his thoughts be known, because evidently those thoughts didn't align with the Trader Joe culture. So he was fired. And in the termination letter, they said, quite frankly, you're an at-will employee. You're here at our will, and we no longer want you here. You're no longer welcome. You don't share our values. And I got thinking about this today because, I'm looking at the reopening up of schools, and I'm looking at the teachers and their unions who are saying, hey, not such a great idea. We should be doing some other things. And the key part of that, the teachers and their unions. For me, that's a big part of this. I'm here to share some thoughts on maybe how we do this reopening thing, if we can do this reopening thing with this new variant popping up and with all the other variables that are being thrown around. That's why I've asked Greg Sampson to come talk with us. He's an education blogger. He's got a piece out over at Grumpy Old Teacher talking about just that. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I look at this Trader Joe's guy, had the audacity to say that, much like you're saying, ventilation, CO2 monitoring, he got fired. Showing the door. Teachers are saying the same thing, and I hear Republicans saying teachers should be fired. Thoughts?
Teachers shouldn't be fired. One
one of the things, before we get into the ventilation and everything else, is the thing that surprises me is that people demand that schools reopen, and nobody's talked about the sacrifice they're asking teachers to make. I've not heard one person say, look, we know we're really asking a lot of you. We know we're asking you to take on a big risk, and show some empathy. It's just, you just want to sit at home and do nothing and get paid for it. That's all we seem to hear.
Yeah, but we're a society that doesn't think about anyone else but ourselves. We have no empathy. We have no concern for others. It's all about our inconvenience. And you see this played out time and time again as these anti-mask people won't even be reasonable and go, you know what? Hey, when I'm in a public space, I'll put the damn thing on. Just out of respect to others. No, it's my right to infect whomever I want. So none of this is surprising to me.
Yeah, well, we seem to have lost our social connection these days. I agree with that. And that's sad that we don't, we're only as safe as we protect one another. That's what I keep telling the students.
Yeah.
If we look out for one another, we follow the protocols, we can keep ourselves as safe as we can.
Yeah, look, I don't know anyone who doesn't want the schools back open. I don't. I really don't. Every teacher I talk to says, I'd rather be in front of the classroom, looking the kids in the eyes. Every kid I talk to now, they're tired of the novelty of staying home. They're ready to get back into classes with their friends. And to be honest, I'm at a moment right now where, a year ago I was a little concerned that cyber charters might be the wave of the future. I have no concerns at this point that cyber charters are a worry in the future.
No, we're all struggling with the same thing, and I think parents are seeing that the virtual learning model doesn't work very well. Either when they're young, parents have to step in and sort of be a home teacher to help their children with the virtual lessons, and the older teens, they don't really thrive at it. A few do, but a lot of them, they're at that age where they haven't developed the self-discipline and the work habits and everything else, and it's hard for them to keep with their lessons, especially if their parents are going to work and they're left home alone. The teenager can certainly look after themselves at home, but it's very hard for them to be motivated and have the self-discipline to get on the computer every day and attend their school lessons.
Yeah, and I've realized that, I don't think I'm stupid. I've done fairly well in school over the years, but I'm realizing that there's a lot I have forgotten in the 30 plus years that I've been out of high school. As I'm trying to teach trying to work with my high school students on, there's a lot I have forgotten.
Yeah. Yes, and a lot of the children are failing to thrive at home, too. I know I've talked with students over this year. I get them by themselves so the other students can't listen in and, tell me what's going on, and they'll tell me, I just don't feel like doing anything. So it's really tugging hard at them, too. They're not really thriving. They need to be back, but it's got to be safe. I mean, we talk about their mental health being at home, but we got to look out for their physical health if they come into a school building with 1,000 other people.
Now, the argument that I get, Greg, is that, well, they're going to be fine. If they get it, they'll just be a little sick for a couple of days. They're young, they're healthy, good, strong, young immune system. They'll be fine. They'll get through it. So it's worth the risk. That's the argument that I'm getting from my conservative friends.
Yes, till one of their children gets sick, or one of their brother's children get sick, or something like that, and then they start singing a different tune. It's okay when you talk about kids in general. When it's your own, it's a whole different thing. Your own child is the one who got sick, got that syndrome that really gives them a hard time. Can't remember what it is, the name of it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
So how do we, like I said, I don't think anyone wants the schools to remain where they are. I think everyone wants things to open up. The Biden administration has said within the first 100 days, going to do it. They're spending a lot of money in this American Rescue Plan to make that happen. And there's money there. So if there's a way that money can help solve this problem, how do you see that being spent and what it needs to be spent on?
Well, as I see it, the biggest risk with the COVID is the airborne transmission.
Right.
And that brings up the CO2 readings, which I started doing myself. I read about it and said, I'll just go ahead and see what it's like in my classroom. I bought a monitor, brought it in, and it was amazing how quickly a room with 25 students, one adult, can raise the CO2 levels. Now, CO2 is not dangerous in itself, but if it starts at 410 and in 3 hours it's almost 4,000, then that's telling me my room's not ventilated.
Right. Open a window. Open a window, Greg.
Yeah. Right. Well, open a window, and that does help, but I'm lucky I have windows to open. A lot of teachers don't. So it's like it's a local district issue. They have to go through and assess their buildings room by room, which ones are safe, which ones are not, and what needs to be done. There are things that can be done to mitigate. The CDC put out a whole list, and everybody read "open a window" and stopped. And there was quite a bit of discussion going on that. But they had more recommendations. One of which is give teachers control of the thermostat. Let them turn the fan on. You don't have to heat or cool the air. Just run it all day long to keep the air mixed. Improve the ventilation in the room. And that proved out for me. A couple of weeks ago, we had a couple of days here in Florida in the 80s. And I had to manually pop the air conditioning on to cool the room down. But when that air conditioner ran, and with my 2 upper windows open, my CO2 readings were back down to 400, the level of outdoor air, just by being able to run that piece of equipment along with having the other. Really did wonders for my classroom. Now, I'm lucky that I do have a couple windows I can open, even though I have to get on a ladder every morning and climb up to open them, and then at the end of the day, climb back up to shut them. Other teachers aren't so lucky. So what other things can be done? I have 2 appliances in my room. I had to buy them myself. I've had them all year long. One is a HEPA air filtering appliance that is said that in a 90-minute class period, which is what I have, it'll completely run the indoor air through it 3 times. So I guess that's once every 30 minutes. So I know that's been helping. And then I also bought one of those UVC light appliances like hospitals have, so that as that runs air through it, it's not as efficient, but any viable particles are zapped, just like they do in hospitals. And I'm sure that they have played a big part in helping keep my room safe for the students and myself. And if districts are getting money, if you can't open windows, and why not put these appliances into classrooms? I did a calculation, the what we call sneeze guards, the barriers that go on the desks.
Right.
If your listeners are familiar with those. And my school district spent between $2 and $3 million for those. So they could have taken that money and bought the HEPA air filters and supplied every classroom with one instead. And maybe that's better, because when the Department of Health calls, and you tell them, well, the students were separated by these desk barriers, and they say, we don't care about that. Those don't work. So there are other things we can do. Nothing's perfect. But like here in Florida, and I come from a practical set of mind, we were forced to open, so what can we do to make it work? And those are some of the things I've been doing.
Now, is it possible to reopen in a safe manner? Is it possible to do what you're doing? Because look, I can always open a window. One way or another, I will get a window open. There are these new tools called bricks. One way or another, I can open a window.
Right. Really, I don't want to make a blanket decision. I think it's a local thing. And I think, districts have to assess it. I don't even know that states can make that decision. I mean, they can make recommendations, but it's got to be a local decision. Every situation will be different, and I'm sure there are some buildings and maybe school districts where it's gotten to the point where it's not safe for them to open right now, and there are others that can. I'm fortunate in a building where a lot of the schools built in my city were built on on the cheap, but that's kind of working right now because everything faces outdoors. It's not like they built one huge building with everything inside. You have separate standalone buildings. So there are lots of windows and lots of doors, and you can do things, but other schools won't be situated like that.
Yeah, I think of a lot of inner city schools that are probably 70 to 100 years old, where you might not be able to open the window. And do they even have ventilation systems, let alone ones that can have HEPA filters on them? You got to wonder.
Yeah, you do have to wonder, and that's why it's got to be a local thing, and the detailed work has to be done. The inspections have to be done, and each room has to be addressed individually. At least that's the way that I see it.
All right, so I'm not going to get an answer out of you whether it's safe to reopen and that we can do this if we spend the right amount of money and do the right things. I'm not going to get that, right?
No, we can make it better if we're smart and spend the money. We can make anything better, but can we approach a level of comfort? That's a hard call to make.
Yeah, I'm with you. It is a tough call to make, and fortunately, I'm not the guy who has to make it at this moment. I just have to make it for my own kids, which inevitably all parents have to make that decision. But Greg, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Keep up the great work there at the Grumpy Old Teacher blog. We'll get links out on how folks can take a look at the work that you do. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Greg Sampson, education blogger. Check out his work at thegrumpyoldteacher.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1925. That was the day the first civil lawsuit for damages was filed on behalf of the Radium Girls. During the 1910s and 20s, radium was all the rage. It was considered a medical cure-all for everything from blindness to asthma. The U.S. Radium Corporation employed hundreds of young women in New Jersey and Illinois to paint radium onto watch dials and military instruments. Women workers were instructed to shape the paintbrushes to a fine point with their lips in order to paint the numbers onto the watch faces. They soon fell ill. Many complained of losing scores of teeth and shattered and rotting jaws. The death toll began to rise. U.S. Radium and other related companies initially tried to smear the women as suffering from syphilis. Catherine Wiley of the New Jersey Consumers League began investigating the use of radium by dial painters. She was also concerned about how emissions affected the community surrounding the plant. Wiley enlisted the help of Alice Hamilton, mother of industrial medicine and occupational toxicology. The chief medical examiner of Essex County determined the women suffered from radium exposure. They were exhaling radon gas. The findings were earth-shattering for the industry. Case proceedings were highly publicized in the press. Extremely frail and sick young women appeared in court, barely able to walk or testify. The company agreed to settle the case. $10,000 for each woman, a $400 a year pension, and medical care. Women at the Ottawa plant suffered for years before finally learning the truth about their job-related illnesses. The case impacted fields related to occupational safety and health. It also fundamentally broadened scientific understanding of radioactive elements. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's a scary story. Evidently, one of the people arrested in the Capitol riot, a guy named John Daniel Andres, 35-year-old guy from Maryland, arrested last month, charged with 2 felonies, violent entry and disorderly conduct on the Capitol grounds. He pleaded not guilty recently, and it's come to light that this, while he was in the Marine Corps, he was actually a crew chief for the presidential helicopter. He was actually in a highly restrictive unit that requires top-level security clearance to work on Marine One. I got to tell you, that kind of stuff is a little scary. Consider, and if you're Joe Biden, you kind of got to wonder, is this what I got to worry about? Wow, scary stuff. We are just, I'll tell you, we are in interesting times. As I said today, not one Republican voted for the American Rescue Plan, and I'm curious for my Republican listeners. Do you look at this and go, damn right they didn't, and I don't want them to. I want to hear an actual argument of why this is a bad idea, other than what the Republicans have thrown out, which is this is just a blue state bailout. Yet you've got numerous Republican governors and mayors and county commissioners and people across Republican states going, no, this is a state and local bailout. We need this. Because understand, states generally, I don't know any state that can run a budget deficit. Some have some extra reserves and rainy day funds. Pennsylvania's got a small rainy day fund, but they can't run deficits. They can't borrow to meet their budgets. They can do some creative mirror doing stuff like that, but at the end of the day, there's no running long-term debt. It doesn't happen. So you may have to cut massive cuts to get through, or you got to raise taxes. Well, raising taxes during an economic downturn, generally not a good idea. And slashing social programs during a major economic crisis, probably also not a great idea. So not one Republican voted for it, and I'm curious. Are the Republican voters okay with this? I mean, the distraction has been, and we've been distracted. I got to see Kevin McCarthy read, what was it, Green Eggs and Ham? I do not like them, Sam, I am. And he read it very poorly, I'll be honest. I was not interested in hearing him read Green Eggs and Ham. I am not. But, that was the distraction. It's been all about Dr. Seuss. It's been about Mr. Potato Head or Potato Head. It's been about, I just found out that, I went and got my hair cut, and in there are the angry people. Pepe Le Pew got canceled from the new Space Jam. I'm going, really? And you're upset about that? I don't care at all. A private entity made a private decision not to include something in their movie. I could care less. If anything, they did it to get the kind of attention that they got, and they made a political gamble. Whatever they got to do. But they're focused on all this other stuff, all these distractions. And I saw an interesting comment by a right-wing commentator who said that, he's pretty confident that the Republican voters will forget all about the fact that not one Republican voted for this American Rescue Plan, but they will remember Dr. Seuss, and they will remember Potato Head, and they will remember Pepe Le Pew, even if he is French. And it got me thinking, going, do Republican officials think down that far of the average voting Republican? I mean, there was that comment that went around for a while that Trump was attributed to Trump that he didn't actually say, but it was plausible, which is why everyone believed it. I guess they claimed it was like a Time magazine article back in the 90s that said that if he were to run if he was going to run for president, he would run as a Republican because they're stupid. And that was basically the argument. And this right-wing commentator is saying kind of the same thing, that Republican voters are stupid. They're not going to remember that Republicans didn't help them in their hour of need and weren't there to get them the resources that they got, and they're going to get. But they'll remember something stupid like Dr. Seuss, like the company that prints Dr. Seuss deciding not to put any more in print, or the company that does Mr. Potato Head just calling it Potato Head from now on. Now remember, these are the people who tell you they believe in the free market. They believe in corporate rights. Yeah, it's really very bizarre. And the thing that is frightening is how lockstep the Republican Party can be. Whereas the Democratic Party's all over the place. They eat their own constantly. They're forever eating each other and pitted against one another internally forever. Every day on the left, there's someone sniping at one section because you're not pure enough or you don't know. It's crazy. But the Republicans, they fall into line. They get into lockstep. And look, I look at this movement across the country of Republicans, lining up to vote for these anti-voting bills. Michael Steele, the former head of the RNC, was quoted saying that he says it's appalling what's happening. There have been no provable, obvious system-wide failures or fraud that would require the kind of legislative remedies that Republican legislators are embarking on. What the hell are you so afraid of? Black people voting? Yes. You're a black guy in the Republican Party and you just figured it out. Good on you. Congratulations. That didn't take you long. Now, Michael Steele's got to be in his 60s. He figured it out, which tells you an old dog can learn a new trick. And maybe this is one of those things that he'd been denying himself all these years. But understand, every one of these 43 states that are moving these 253 pieces of legislation through, states like Pennsylvania, are doing it to block. Be honest, call it for what it is. They want to block black people from voting. Or as Rick Santorum said, blah people. Got to stop letting those blah people vote. Florida, they have a state Senate committee, approved a bill just yesterday that would eliminate mail-in ballot drop boxes. No more drop boxes. Bad. Pennsylvania's limiting drop box access as well. So is Virginia and Georgia. You've got Arizona, that they want to have mail-in ballots notarized. Who's going to go through the process of paying someone to notarize your individual ballot? Can you look? I have a hard time getting a notary to sign a card transfer. You're going to get a million people to go to the notary to get their ballots notarized? Of course not. And they know this is going to limit people's access to the ballot box. They want to limit mail-in ballot. It's what it is. South Carolina, if you have a mail-in ballot, they want you to show up with your photo ID to hand in the ballot. Got a photo ID. It's crazy. You've got 18 states this year that have enacted voter ID laws, tougher voter ID laws. Things like Mississippi, where they're saying if you have an out-of-state driver's license, sorry, we don't take other people's license. Those could be fraudulent. New Hampshire won't let student IDs pass. Yeah, we know that's who you are, but no, nothing for you. There are states that are cracking down on how people register. I'm of the mindset that the day you turn 18, boom, congratulations, you're registered to vote. We knew who you were. And it should come with your high school diploma. It should come with your driver's license. Automatically, you're signed up. But no, we have to have all of these ways to keep you from voting because we don't trust you. You're a cheat and a liar. Yet oddly enough, and this is one of those weird things, oddly enough, the only people we seem to catch are Republicans lying, cheating, and stealing and double voting. It happened in the last election. It's crazy. You also have 21 bills introduced in 12 states, according to the Brennan Center, that would expand the ability of a state to purge the voting rolls. Because we don't want those people with those last names voting, so we just purge them. And the question I ask to my Republican friends is this the kind of country you want? Where we create problems that don't exist. No one's come back and said this is proof of what the claims are. You have Donald Trump whining and complaining that he feels like he was cheated. And now you've got the entire Republican establishment moving on every one of his grievances with no proof. And while some of them may be grumbling in the background, they're walking in lockstep because they're afraid of we the people. They're afraid of the voting populace. And look, I got to think part of what happened this week with not one Republican voting for the American Rescue Plan, not one, is they feel pretty confident that they're going to keep people from voting. They're going to be able to block the ballot box, and that you're stupid. Here we are. Welcome to America. Love to hear your thoughts. If you have a cogent argument on why not one Republican voted for it, love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Last week's OPEC decision not to raise oil production is really causing gas prices to soar.
Global oil prices are rising again, and so is the price at the pump. Interior Department moving swiftly to roll back Trump-era rollbacks. Plus,
switching away from gas to electricity is the most efficient way to eliminate carbon emissions from most buildings by 2050.
But not if cities are blocked from doing so.
Are they being blocked from doing so?
Yep.
All of those outrages and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A crude awakening. Oil prices hitting their highest level since October 2018.
And Maria Bartiromo and Fox News don't know whether to be outraged about it or delighted. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, if there's one thing I have been consistent about over the years, is that every time there is an oil spill, I always warn people, do not listen to the initial numbers that come out from the company because they're always either lying or they're just making it up, and the numbers turn out to be way, way higher than they let on.
Oh, yes, and that is indeed true for a fossil fuel spill in a North Carolina nature preserve last August. The company that owns the aging Colonial Pipeline initially estimated the rupture spilled about 63,000 gallons of gasoline.
Oh, that's all, 63,000 gallons.
But Earther reports that the company quietly filed a new assessment. The actual spill is not 63,000 gallons, but closer to 1.2 million gallons.
Oh, there you go. Who could have guessed it?
The pipeline highlights the next big issue for American fossil fuel infrastructure: what to do about decrepit, aging pipelines as the country shifts to clean energy.
This is a huge pipeline, and it is a huge spill, but because they downplayed it when it initially happened a few months ago, nobody even knows about it.
That's right. Global oil prices are heading up again after falling to unheard-of lows as coronavirus shutdowns crushed demand for fossil fuels over the last year. And that means retail gas prices and pollution are increasing as well. The rise in gas prices is due in part to fossil fuel ramping up again and an attack on Saudi Arabian oil facilities over the weekend, and because OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, agreed last week to maintain production cuts to keep supplies low and prices high. A growing number of cities across the country are attempting to update their building codes to ban natural gas and shift to electrification to combat climate change.
That's good.
But that has just been thwarted.
Uh-oh.
Huffington Post reports that the International Code Council, a private nonprofit consortium that oversees much of the nation's building codes, voted late last week to strip local governments of their rights to set future energy efficiency codes.
Wait, what?
That after intense lobbying from construction and gas industry groups. The new system allows local officials to give input on new codes, but industry will effectively control the outcome.
So this International Code Council, they are elected by whom exactly?
It's a complicated system how they came to control establishing most of the nation's building codes. It's going to be complicated to unwind. The American Institute of Architects called their decision, quote, a step backwards for climate action. Environmental groups are calling on the Biden administration or Congress to step in and set up a new oversight body.
So this unelected oversight body makes these decisions after they get payments from the oil and gas industry. Nothing shady there at all.
Coal mining company Black Jewel has asked a bankruptcy court to allow it to shed its financial responsibility to clean up its abandoned mines.
Oh, nothing shady there either.
Black Jewel is hoping to walk away from almost 200 mining permits in 4 states, setting up a potential crisis over cleanup and reclamation. Black Jewel's bankruptcy is another sign of trouble for the coal industry and states and communities reliant on coal for jobs and for taxpayers who may be stuck with the bill for cleanup and pensions.
Black Jewel.
But some good news. Biden's nominee to head the Interior Department, Representative Deb Haaland of New Mexico, appears headed to confirmation in the U.S. Senate, and the department itself is already moving fast. The Interior Department recently scrapped the Trump administration's controversial open science dictate that restricted the kinds of research the agency was allowed to use in making important environmental policy decisions.
The open science dictate restricted the type of science they could use.
Yes.
Got it?
And on Monday, the department tossed the Trump administration's egregious rollback of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that gutted protections for hundreds of species of migratory birds, effectively legalizing all unintentional migratory bird deaths.
So it's a rollback?
Basically.
Okay, this is a great system. But we'll take what we can get. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, sad day today. Lou Outens died today. Lived a long life, though. Lou was 94 years old. He died at his home in Belgium. And why is Lou so important? I used his products a lot when I was younger, and still do, actually. He is the guy who invented the cassette tape. He sold them off as an electronics item that is smaller than a pack of cigarettes was his slogan. Tells you how different the society was back in 1963. He also, once he didn't quit with just the cassette tape, because I had hundreds of them when I was younger, he went on to develop the compact disc as well. So the music that we loved and that I bought multiple times, from 8-track to album to cassette tape to compact disc, now to MP3. He had a big hand in all of it. So sad day for Lou. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, like why no Republican voted to give away money. I've asked our good friend, former Republican Congressman Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time.
Well, thank you, Rick. They only vote when Trump's president to give away money, okay?
Is that what it is?
Don't you understand that by now? Of course.
Look, if you can't get people to go, yeah, we should give away money, I don't know what there's nothing left to agree on. And this is my argument for ending the filibuster. This is overwhelmingly popular. If we can't agree on giving money away, I don't know.
Well, I'm not for the filibuster period, never have been. I think it's, ancient and antiquated. And I was surprised, actually, today President Biden, well, not surprised too much. It's kind of a political statement, said he was against it. It was an article on Manchin that they focused, on CNN, and the president said he was against get rid of it, I think, is what I had read in the thing. But I guess that's because, he'll let the Senate do what it wants on it. He's not going to get too much deep into that. But there were a couple of stimulus packages, obviously previous, that were supported. 54% of the bill directly goes towards households.
that now you're the guy who has the experience on how budgeting and this stuff works. That to me is enormous. That number is huge when you consider the things that we've done in the past, or at least that's my view. Is that's an enormous number.
Yeah, that's 54% directly. Now, directly goes to households. So in addition to the $1,400, there's also extra unemployment insurance through Labor Day. It did compromise from $400 to $300, okay, in the two versions. Senate took it down 100. Expanded tax credits and various programs for rent, food, food assistance, health insurance, to be more on the affordable side. So that's directly. So if you look at it from the budgeting aspect, low income and moderate income Americans will benefit most from this package, especially if you're earning $75,000 or less as a single person, or $150,000 or less as a family. It could be a family of any amount, number of children, because we know that eventually it should have that impact of the 54%, Rick, in that bill would have a poverty rate drop probably about 1/3 as a direct result of that piece of legislation, probably. Now, there's other parts to it, too. Some of it will be criticized eventually if it's not spent, the business part, because there's still some monies that have lapsed. We'll see what happens with that, and if they'll be better in this administration with the rulemaking process, maybe more transparent, getting out to more people that deserve it versus 25 top companies.
Yeah.
As happened before.
No, I mean I'm happy with it. It got me thinking, because you were talking about the per person money and the families with so many kids, and I couldn't find. I think in the last one they capped it at 4 kids. Did you see any capping? Because I was thinking about Octomom, who's got 9 kids. They're going to end up with like over $12,000. I'm going, that could be helpful.
I don't think I saw a cap. Now I've got to tell you, 600 some pages, and although they read it, I didn't listen to the total reading of the 600 pages.
And neither did they.
Right, neither did they. Now, Republicans will argue the smaller bill would have been okay, and too much money spent on programs not related to coronavirus crisis. But on the Democrat side, they're going to say, look, this is an overall package that is not only, if they're smart, they'll say 54% direct money to people, but also money dealing for the states, dealing for the virus itself, which makes up, the rest of the money in the program, in the package.
No, I mean, I think it's a good step. It's going to help shore up our economy. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Morgan Stanley who came out with their prediction for this year, 7.3% growth rate they're claiming this year, because there's a huge influx of demand going to be in this economy, because the people at the bottom of the scale, they're going to have some money.
Yes, and a good way to message this, I think, is this directly, and this breaks it right down into understandable terms, because sometimes people use too many statistics. A family of 4 that had an income of about $53,000, family of 4, before the pandemic, which is not a large amount of money, and has one parent out of work, will receive more than $22,000 from this package. A single person who's unemployed and used to earn about $25,000 at one point in time could receive up to $15,000, and that's eligible for other things to help pay rent, affordable health insurance. So that's in addition to any direct payments. So it's not just about the $1,400. There's more in there.
No, I mean, and you're right. That's the way they're going to message you. We'll find out how they're going to go about it, because evidently the sales tour begins on Friday when Biden's going to sign it, and I guess there's going to be a tour of saying how great it's going to be. And look, I think as people get it into their hands, as economic activity goes, we're looking at a good year, I think.
Well, yes, and let's look back at a quick piece of history here. And it was a painful piece of history for the Democratic side. You recall, and I recall, after the ACA passed, the American Health Care Act, all right, after it passed, You can remember where, as the Republicans went on the offense, a lot of Democrats started to go on the defense. Instead of defending the bill, they started to say, well, we could tweak this. Well, this was bad. And it hurt them. It hurt them in the election process. It hurt them in the messaging. So, there's not really weak parts of this. They can defend this without, doing what they did with the Health Care Act, which was to say, well, yeah, I should have done this, and I should have voted this way or that way. They need to message it correctly from the start, something people understand, just like you and I just spoke about.
Right. No, I mean, the reality is this bill, the Democrats showed a little spine on, and they showed that they could get their house in order and get something moved through. Look, I'm looking at this going, I'm pretty happy right now. I'd like to see you move on the filibuster so we can get H.R. 1 pushed through, which I think absolutely has to happen. And I would love to see the PRO Act as well. This gives me just a tiny bit of hope.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that, I think there's some hope out there. Of course, again, there are a couple bills coming up that also could have bipartisan support. The transportation, infrastructure bill. That could win some bipartisan support. And even though this one wasn't, quote, bipartisan, there are other bills, and that could happen too. If it doesn't, then the Democrat side will have to try to do this then without Republican votes.
And will they be able to do that? Will you be able to move an infrastructure bill through budget reconciliation?
No, I think that, Senator Manchin has made it clear on that one that he wants Republicans on board one way or the other. And he could probably be able to, I would say, shepherd something through, probably getting some Republican votes, just a straight-out bill, especially an infrastructure bill.
Yeah, but, I keep looking at this, and I'm going, not one. You didn't get one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping, Joe Manchin is having some cloakroom conversations of how we get a really big, healthy, chunky kind of infrastructure plan put through that, as you're saying, is should be nonpartisan. I'm hoping. I guess I can hope.
Well, and he says in a quote today on a story, he does say that he doesn't like being in this position, and he doesn't want to be in this position. And he's actually said there are 49 other Democrats, please come forward, because he's in a lonely position right now. But he's saying that this is what Manchin says, that maintaining the 60-vote requirement to overcome the filibuster is a red line for him, and he'll block advancing infrastructure package on a party line vote if the Democrats don't work with Republicans. So he's kind of laying everything out on that infrastructure bill, which honestly, look, I've been on 2 infrastructure bills when I was on the Transportation Committee with Don Young as chairman and Bud Schuster before that from Pennsylvania. You knew Bud. And if you are going to maybe get some votes, it's going to be that bill, maybe. Of course, maybe the Senate's so far partisan it won't happen, but that is a bill you could get some votes on.
Yeah, the son of the Asphalt King, I think, would have been one of the pro infrastructure folks. I think he possibly would have been.
Right.
But we'll see. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we get something, especially if we can get the PRO Act pushed through, so people can organize and we can have good union construction workers working those jobs. There could be a future in this. I also
that was I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but that was a great piece of legislation. And in fact, I didn't like the way they had the title, which is expanding labor rights. Was the media headline, and it's not really expanding labor rights; it's giving at least some basic, labor rights. It's almost like, well, you've got all these labor rights, we're going to expand them. No, this is going to some basic changes in labor that are going to be pretty healthy for people.
I mean, it's basically we're gonna do what the original intent of the I'm looking for my original intent Republican friends who love to talk about the Constitution being the original intent of that. I'm talking about the original intent of the National Labor Relations Act was not to give employers any rights whatsoever. It was all about giving workers rights because they understood employers have all the rights. You need to level the playing field a little bit, and for me, that's the direction we need to be talking about as well.
Right, and so we'll see what happens with it. But it obviously provides increased collective bargaining and also some big rights in the workplace disputes.
Yeah, only one Democrat voted against the PRO Act, and I can never say his name right. Henry Callar or something from Texas.
Yeah, I never could either, and I served with him, Carrera.
Yeah, something like that. But I've said today, I put it out on Twitter, whoever runs against him, I will help you raise money. This is one of those lined in the sand moments. It's for me unforgivable. I wanted to get your thoughts on this story because you've got this Representative Pamela Jayapal of Washington who evidently sent a letter to the House Ethics Committee and the Office of Congressional Ethics. She wants to launch an investigation into gun fetish Barbie Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, and Paul Gosar, claiming that she wants them to thoroughly investigate their activities on January 6th and the lead up to January 6th. Is this something they do?
Well, if a member has... Here's the thing about the Ethics Committee. When I served in Congress, you could not have any outside ethics requests. It had to be a member filing. Now, one of the reasons for that, frankly, and we have to be kind of, I think, fair about this, is that if you had anybody from the outside filing, we would have 450,000 filings every month,
right,
all over the place. So it came to the point where a member has to file, and frankly, she's got some guts to do it because a lot of members don't want to do it. It starts a member filing war. They're always afraid of that. But once she files, once that's filed in that, it has to. I would not think they could just say no. We're going to dismiss it. They're going to have some type of look to see if they should dismiss it or not. So I think they've got to take a look at it once it's filed.
Now, one of the complaints is that the Lauren Boebert character, she filmed herself, carrying a concealed gun on the Capitol grounds. Is that not allowed?
Yeah. Here's the rule on the Capitol on the guns. If a member wants to have a gun in their office, the member can have a gun in their office. And here's how the gun. And I went through this, by the way, for many members. Because I chaired House Administration, which oversees the rules of the House, and I had members that came to me and said they want to be able to carry a gun. This was years ago. They wanted to be able to carry a gun. They wanted the rights to carry guns on airplanes, et cetera. And frankly, we declined it. We didn't enter into doing that in any form. So here's what we did do. If a member wanted to have a gun in their office, they could. The gun had to be brought in by usually, Sergeant of Arms office, would bring the gun into the member's office, and that's where the gun remained. But the had to be brought in by the Sergeant of Arms. So D.C. has, the Capitol's under D.C., and as far as having a concealed carry, there are no concealed carry permits that I know of. None. The only way you have a gun, and I don't think it's changed since I've been there, is if the Sergeant of Arms office brings the gun to the Capitol for you, and then it's kept in your office somewhere.
Okay. So let me ask you, last question I've got on this then. How would you have dealt with someone like Boebert, who is, she's making her brand on being gun fetish Barbie? She had, I don't know if you saw the video of her, Nancy Pelosi, tear down this wall. She's walking around claiming that, it's the Democrats' fault that there's a fence around the Capitol. And at the end of it, you hear a shotgun blast and a reload. And you go, stoke the fires much there, gun nut Barbie? How would you have dealt with someone like her who is defiantly, saying to the public, I'm not going to listen to your ethics or your procedures. I'm going to do whatever I want. How would you deal with that?
Well, at the time I was there again, and she's got this ad that she's going to carry her Glock around D.C. and on the Hill, and you can't have a gun. You can have one in Virginia, by the way, but you can't have the gun in D.C. And so she's saying she's going to carry it. And when I was, in the House, we would have warned the member that you can't do something of that nature. And if the member then continued, the member would be taken to the Ethics Committee and potentially censored, or at some point in time even removed from the House by a vote if they wouldn't comply, if they continued to do something illegal. But we never ever had this issue get to this point. Look, Rick, I can tell you that there were members that would come to me, and I'm sure they went to Steny Hoyer, our ranking member, and said, I want to carry a gun. I have a right to carry a gun. And we would tell them, you don't in D.C., and you don't in the Capitol. You can have it in your office. That was the rule established.
Yeah, but we're in this moment where now.
So I think she would have been censured, taken to the Ethics Committee, and frankly, if she continued to defy it, she could have been up for expulsion.
So why haven't they done this yet?
I don't know. I mean, it's illegal to carry a gun in D.C. Now we can argue about gun control, but the fact remains that it's illegal in D.C. and you cannot carry a gun around the Capitol. So I don't know why they haven't done something with it.
Because you look at her whole shtick is this kind of reality TV kind of I don't know that she's I don't know what kind of representative she is. I haven't seen any legislation that she's moved forward on. I see her doing a lot of videos and a lot of social media, like she's one of the Kardashians, a Kardashian with a gun instead of a big butt.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we did make provisions. We had one time a priest showed up from Kentucky and walked up to the Capitol and to the guards and said, "Where do I register my gun?" Because in Kentucky, I guess she at that time went into a building and they put it in a lockbox.
Right.
They had to instantly charge him with a felony. They really didn't want to because he didn't know. But that's what they did. They would charge them with a felony. That's how it ran. Now they changed that if somebody didn't have knowledge and wanted to actually register their gun and came from a state, that they would confiscate the gun but not charge them at some point in time. So, but those are the rules of the Capitol then. I still think they're the rules of the Capitol now. You can't be a member and carry your gun around. You can't do it.
So no open carry, no shotguns or anything like that. Nothing.
No. Anybody that has a gun will be the Capitol Hill Police. Now, what they're going to argue, here's what they're going to argue. I mean, they're going to argue that because of what happened at the Capitol, they could have been killed. And they should.
Yeah, because of their actions.
Also because yes, but also because of the fact that the response was so messed up of what happened with the hierarchy of the police. And I think hopefully they've learned from that. But if you look at this, the gun toting, the 1967 law prohibits the public from carrying guns on the Capitol grounds, and that was signed by Lyndon Johnson in 1967.
Yeah.
So I mean that's been there ever since. If they want to carry a gun, they need to change the law.
Put forth that piece of legislation and let's see how that goes. You're absolutely right. But Bob, I appreciate the time and the thoughts and the information, things I did not know. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Look, I thought at least something. That's a little bit more than even I thought. But I'm hoping that they grow a spine and they put gun fetish Barbie in her place. Because look, at the end of this, I think she wants to be arrested. I think she wants to play the victim. Because the gun nuts, they that's their claim to fame. They want the money. Comes down to the money. Oh well. Good day today, though. We got the American Rescue Plan pushed through. Also, Merrick Garland as our new head of the Justice Department, new Attorney General. Good stuff. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.